The night shift at St. Jude Memorial Hospital always began with the same heavy silence. It was a silence made of filtered air and the distant hum of electricity. Dr. Elena Vance walked down the main corridor of the surgical wing. Her white coat was crisp and sharp. Her footsteps were light, deliberate. She was a woman who found comfort in the predictable nature of medicine. For Elena, a human body was a machine. It was a beautiful and complex machine that could be fixed with a steady hand and a sharp blade. She entered the break room and poured a cup of black coffee. The liquid was bitter and far too hot. She didn't mind. The heat reminded her that she was still awake. It was 3 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. Most of the city was asleep under blankets and dreams. But in the emergency room, the doors were about to open. A loud chime echoed through the hallway. It was the signal for a high-priority arrival. Elena set her coffee down and moved toward the trauma bay. She saw the paramedics pushing a stretcher through the double doors. They weren't running. Usually, if a patient was dying, they were running. But this was different. They were walking with a strange kind of caution. "Patient name is Julian Blackwood," the lead paramedic said as he handed Elena a digital tablet. "We found in the back of a private limousine near the harbor. No physical trauma. No signs of struggle. He simply stopped responding to his staff. His vitals are perfect, but he is in a deep coma." Elena looked down at the man on the stretcher. He did not look like a typical patient. He was wearing a hand-tailored suit that cost more than her car. His hair was dark and neatly styled. His face was symmetrical and striking. He looked like a king who had decided to take a nap in the middle of a war. She reached out to check his carotid pulse. As soon as her skin touched his neck, she felt a jolt. It wasn't a medical anomaly, it was a sensation of pure energy. It was like touching a live wire. Her fingers lingered on his skin for a second longer than necessary. She felt his heart beating. It was slow. It was steady. It was confident. "Move him to the private wing," said. Her voice was slightly lower than usual. "Room 701, I will take this case myself. I don't want any residents or interns in that room. This is a private matter for the board of directors." The paramedics nodded and moved away. Elena stood in the empty trauma bay for a moment. She looked at her hand. It was still tingling. She felt a sudden wave of anxiety. She was a professional. She was a scientist. But for the first time in her career, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. 2 days passed and Julian Blackwood did not wake up. Every test result came back normal. His brain waves were active. They were patterned in a way that Elena had never seen before. It was as if he was dreaming in a language she couldn't translate. Elena found herself spending more time in room 701 than in her own office. She told the nursing staff that the patient required constant neurological monitoring. She sat in the darkened room and watched the green line of the heart monitor. The sound of the machine was the only thing filling the space. Beep, beep, beep. She began to notice things about him. He had a small scar on his left temple. He had the hands of a pianist, or perhaps a surgeon. He smelled of expensive sandalwood and something cold like the winter wind. She found herself wonder what kind of life a man like this lived. Was he a businessman? A criminal? A traveler? On the third night, the storm intensified. Thunder shook the heavy glass windows of the private wing. Elena was sitting by his bed. She was reading his lab results for the 10th time. She felt a sudden change in the room. The air felt heavier. The temperature seemed to drop. "You have a very focused stare, doctor," a voice said. The voice was deep and smooth. It sounded like velvet rubbing against steel. Elena froze. She looked up and saw Julian Blackwood looking at her. His eyes were a pale shade of gray. They were sharp and intelligent. He didn't look like a man who had just woken up from a coma. He looked like a man who had been waiting for her to look at him. "Mr. Blackwood," Elena said. She stood up and adjusted her coat. "You are finally awake. Do you know where you are?" Julian sat up slowly. He didn't look at the room. He only looked at her. "I am in a hospital, and you are the woman who has been sitting by my bed for 48 hours. I recognize your breathing. I recognize the way you move." Elena felt her heart skip beat. She tried to remain professional. I am your doctor. My name is Elena Vance. You were found unconscious. We were very concerned about your brain activity." Julian leaned forward. He moved with the grace of a predator. "You weren't just concerned, Elena. You were curious. There is a difference." "You should call me Dr. Vance," she corrected him. "I could call you that," Julian said. He reached out and touched the sleeve of her coat. "But that would be a lie. We both know that something happened the moment you touched my pulse in the emergency room. I felt it too, even in the dark." Elena stepped back. She should have called the nurses. She should have recorded his awakening in the official chart. But she stayed. She stayed because the way he looked at her made her feel like the white walls of the hospital were melting away. "Why were you found alone, Julian?" she asked. "Who are you hiding from?" Julian smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "Everyone is hiding from something, doctor. I hide from my enemies. You hide from your emotions behind that white coat. But tonight the storm is too loud to keep hiding." The relationship shifted from clinical to personal within a week. It was a slow and quiet transformation. It happened in the hours between midnight and dawn. Julian did not act like a patient. He treated the private wing like his own palace. He had clothes delivered. He had books delivered. And eventually, he had secrets delivered. One evening, Elena entered the room to find a small table set with silver plates and crystal glasses. There was a bottle of wine chilling in a bucket of ice. The room was lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. "Julian, this is against every protocol in this building," Elena said. She closed the door behind her and locked it. "If the director sees this, I will lose my license." "The director is currently at a gala on the other side of the city," Julian said. He was standing by the window. He was wearing a black silk shirt. He looked like a shadow against the glass. "And the security cameras in this hallway are currently experiencing a technical error." "Sit down, Elena." "Eat me." Elena sat. She felt a strange sense of liberation. She was a woman who followed every rule. She was a woman who never colored outside the lines. But Julian Blackwood was a man who lived in the spaces between the lines. He poured the wine. It was dark and rich. "Tell me why you became a surgeon," he said. "I wanted to understand how things work," she replied. "I wanted to fix what was broken." "And what about you?" Julian asked. He leaned across the table. His eyes were locked onto hers. "Who fixes you when you are broken, Elena?" "I am not broken," she said. But her voice was small. "Everyone is broken in some way," Julian whispered. "Some people are broken by loss. Some are broken by loneliness. You are broken by your own perfection. You are so afraid of making a mistake that you have forgotten how to live." He stood up and walked around the table. He stood behind her. He placed his hands on her shoulders. Elena felt a wave of heat wash over her. She knew she should leave. She knew she should run back to the safety of the operating room. But his touch was the only thing that felt real in a world made of plastic and medicine. He leaned down. His breath was warm against her ear. "Forget the hospital, Elena. Forget the rules. Just for 1 hour, be a woman instead of a doctor." He turned her chair around. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. He leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of wine and secrets. It was a kiss that felt like a confession. Elena reached up and pulled him closer. She didn't care about the cameras. She didn't care about the consequences. In the dark of room 701, she was finally alive. The next morning the hospital felt different. The white lights seemed too bright. The smell of antiseptic felt suffocating. Elena walked through the halls with a secret burning in her chest. She saw Dr. Miller, the hospital director, standing at the nurses' station. He was a man of 70 years, with sharp eyes, and a reputation for being ruthless. "Dr. Vance," Miller said. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on a clipboard. "How is our guest in room 7701? "He is stable," Elena replied. She kept her voice flat. "He is recovering his cognitive functions. I expect a full recovery soon." "Good," Miller said. He finally looked at her. "He is a very important man. He has many friends, and he has many enemies. We must ensure that his stay here is strictly professional. I have noticed that you are spending a great deal of overtime in that wing." It is a complex neurological case, Director, Elena said. I'm sure it is, Miller replied. He leaned in closer. Just remember that at St. Jude, we value transparency. If anything unusual happens in that room, I expect to be the first to know. Elena watched him walk away. She felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. Did he know? Had the technical error with the cameras failed? She hurried to her office and locked the door. She sat at her desk and tried to focus on her surgery schedule, but all she could see were Julian's eyes. She pulled up Julian's official file on her computer. She began to search deeper in the digital archives. She found things that weren't in the initial report. Julian Blackwood wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was a man with no history before 5 years ago. There were rumors of his involvement with a private intelligence firm. There were rumors of a massive heist in Europe that was never solved. She realized she didn't know who was actually lying in that bed. Was he a patient? Or was he a predator using the hospital as a hiding place? That afternoon, she returned to room 701. Julian was standing by the window. He was looking at the city skyline. He didn't turn around when she entered. You were talking to Miller, Julian said. How do you know that? Elena asked. I have my ways of listening, he replied. He turned around. He looked at her with a calm expression. He is a dangerous man, Elena. He isn't just a doctor. He is a broker. He sells information. And he is very interested in me. Who are you, Julian? Elena asked. She stayed near the door. I looked at your files. You don't exist before 5 years ago. You are a ghost. Julian walked toward her. He stopped just inches away. I am the man you kissed last night, he said. That is the only truth that matters right now. The rest of the world is just noise. But you have to decide, are you going to help me? Or are you going to give me to Miller? Elena looked at him. She saw the danger. She saw the mystery. But she also saw the man who had seen through her mask. She reached out and touched his hand. I'm not going to give you to anyone, she whispered. The atmosphere inside St. Jude Memorial Hospital changed after Elena's conversation with Director Miller. Every shadow in the hallway seemed to have eyes. Every whisper near the nurse's station felt like a direct threat. Elena sat in her office and looked at the black screen of her computer. She realized that she was no longer just a surgeon. She was a conspirator in a game that she did not fully understand. She decided to test the limits of Miller's surveillance. She walked toward the private wing, but she did not enter room 701. Instead, she stopped at the supply closet near the elevator. She watched the overhead cameras. They were moving in a slow and rhythmic arc. They were following her every move with a cold and mechanical precision. Elena entered the closet and leaned against the cold metal shelves. She could hear her own breathing. It was fast and shallow. She reached into her pocket and felt the small encrypted flash drive that Julian had given her. He had told her to keep it safe. He had told her that it contained the truth about the hospital's financial records. Is it worth it, Elena? She asked herself in the dark. Is a man you barely know worth the destruction of your entire career? She thought about the way Julian looked at her. She thought of the way he spoke about the soul. In a world of sterile instruments and cold diagnoses, Julian was the only thing that felt warm. He was the only thing that felt human. She pushed the fear down and walked back into the hallway. She arrived at room 701 and found the door slightly open. This was unusual. Julian was always careful about his privacy. She pushed the door open and saw a woman standing by the bed. The woman was tall and elegant. She was wearing a gray business suit, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She was looking at Julian with an expression that Elena could not identify. It was a mix of respect and deep resentment. Who are you? Elena asked. She stepped into the room and closed the door. The woman turned around. Her eyes were sharp and green. I am Sarah Thorne. I am the legal representative for Mr. Blackwood's estate. And you must be Dr. Vance, the woman who is spending all her overtime in this room. Elena felt a surge of defensiveness. I am his primary physician. I am responsible for his recovery. And visitors are not allowed without my prior approval. Sarah Thorne smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. Your approval is no longer required, Doctor. Director Miller has granted me full access to this wing. In fact, he is quite impressed with your dedication. He mentioned that you have gone above and beyond the call of duty. Julian remained silent. He was sitting in the chair by the window. He looked at Alina and gave her a small, almost invisible shake of his head. He was telling her to be careful. He was telling her to stay quiet. I need to perform a physical examination, Alina said to Sarah. I suggest you wait in the lobby. I'm afraid I can't do that, Sarah replied. Mr. Blackwood is in the middle of a very important transition. We need to ensure that his mental state enough to sign certain documents. Director Miller believes that a change in medical staff might be beneficial for his progress. Alina felt a cold weight in her chest. They were trying to remove her. They were trying to separate her from Julian so they could take control of him. She looked at Sarah Thorne and saw the enemy. She saw the corporate machine that wanted to turn a human being into a set of signatures and assets. After Sarah Thorne left the room, the silence was suffocating. Julian stood up and walked toward Alina. He placed his hands on her waist. His touch was firm, but his expression was dark. They are moving faster than I expected, Julian whispered. Sarah isn't just a lawyer. She is a cleaner. She works for the people who want me dead, and Miller is helping them because he wants a share of my company's technology. What technology, Julian? Alina asked. Why is everyone so desperate to control you? Julian led her to the small table in the corner. He sat her down and looked her in the eyes. My company developed a system for deep tissue neural mapping. It was designed to help people with spinal injuries. But Miller wants to use it for something else. He wants to sell it to private military contractors. They want to use it to enhance soldiers, to turn people into weapons. Alina looked at him in horror. But this is a hospital. Miller is a doctor. He took an oath. Miller took an oath to money a long time ago, Julian said. He is using my stay here to gather data. Every test you run on me is being sent to an external server. He is using me as a test subject while I am unconscious. Alina felt a wave of guilt. She had been the one performing the tests. She had been the one drawing the blood and recording the brain activity. She had been Miller's unwitting accomplice. I have to stop it, she said. I have to delete the data. It's too late for that, Julian replied. The data is already gone. But we have something else. The flash drive you have contains the evidence of Miller's illegal contracts. If we can get that drive to the authorities outside this city, we can bring him down. How are we going to get out of here? Alina asked. The guards are everywhere. Sarah Thorne is watching the exit. We are going to use the surgery tomorrow, Julian said. Miller has scheduled me for a neural biopsy. He says it is to check for long-term damage from the coma, but it's a lie. He wants to implant a tracker in my brain so he can follow me wherever I go. Alina felt a cold anger rising within her. The thought of Miller cutting into Julian's brain for profit was more than she could handle. She was a surgeon. She knew the sacred nature of the human mind. To violate it for money was the ultimate sin. I won't let him do it, she said. I will perform the surgery myself. I will tell Miller that I am the only one qualified for the procedure. It's a trap, Elena, Julian warned. If you do the surgery, he will hold you responsible if anything goes wrong. He is setting you up to be the scapegoat. Let him try, Elena said. Her voice was sharp and determined. I am the best neurosurgeon in this hospital. If I am in that operating room, I am the one in control. I will find a way to get you out while you are on the table. That night Alina did not go home. She stayed in her office and studied the blueprints of the surgical floor. She looked for a way to move a patient from the operating room to the service exit without being seen. The hospital was a labyrinth of corridors and locked doors, but she knew the layout better than anyone. At 2 a.m. she returned to room 701. She needed to see Julian one last time before the morning. She found him standing on the small balcony. He was looking at the rain. He looked lonely and vulnerable. Why are you doing this for me, Elena? He asked without turning around. You are risking your life for a ghost. Elena walked toward him and stood by his side. Because you made me realize that I was a ghost too. I lived in this hospital for 10 years, and I never saw anything but blood and bone. You showed me that there is more to a person than their anatomy. Julian turned toward her. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. I am a dangerous man, Elena. I have done things that would make you hate me. I have lied. I have stolen. I have destroyed my enemies without mercy. I know, she said. But in this room you are just a man, and I am just a woman. And that is the only thing I care about right now. Julian pulled her close and kissed her. It was a long and desperate kiss. It felt like a goodbye. It felt like a promise. Elena clung to him as the rain fell around them. She felt the strength of his body and the warmth of his skin. She realized that she loved him. She didn't care about his past or his secrets. She only wanted to save him. If we fail tomorrow, Julian whispered against her lips, I want you to run. Don't look back. Take the flash drive and go to the press. We aren't going to fail, Ilna said. I am going to save you. And then we are going to leave this place forever. She stayed with him until the sun began to rise. They sat in the dark and talked about future. They talked about a life away from white walls and sterile instruments. They talked about a place where they could be free. It was a beautiful dream. But as the first light of dawn touched the hospital windows, Elena knew that the nightmare was just beginning. The morning of the surgery was cold and gray. The surgical floor was busy with activity. Nurses were preparing instruments. Orderlies were moving equipment. Elena walked into the scrub room and began to wash her hands. She moved with a mechanical precision. She watched the water run over her skin. She felt a strange sense of detachment. Director Miller entered the scrub room. He was wearing his surgical gown. He looked at Elena through the mirror. Are you ready, Dr. Vance? He asked. This is a historic procedure. The data we gather today will change the future of medicine. I am ready, Director, Elena replied. But I have a request. I want Sarah Thorne removed from the observation gallery. Her presence is a distraction. Miller smiled. I'm afraid that isn't possible. She is here to represent the interests of the estate. But don't worry about her. Just focus on the patient. Elena walked into the operating room. Julian was already on the table. He was sedated. His eyes were closed and his breathing was controlled by a machine. He looked small under the blue surgical drapes. He looked like a victim. Elena took the scalpel. Her hand was steady. She looked at the heart monitor. The rhythm was slow and regular. Beep, beep, beep. She looked up at the observation gallery. Sarah Thorne was sitting there. She was watching Elena with a cold and hungry expression. Director Miller was standing next to her. Beginning the first incision, Elena said. Her voice was amplified by the intercom. She began the procedure. She worked with a speed and accuracy that surprised the other nurses in the room. She was not just performing a biopsy. She was looking for the tracker that Miller had already hidden in Julian's medical supplies. She found it inside the sterile gauze that was supposed to be used for the closure. It was a tiny device, no larger than a grain of rice. She looked at the camera in the corner of the room. She knew Miller was watching the monitors. She had to move fast. She palmed the tracker and dropped it into a waste bin near her feet. Then she continued the surgery as if nothing had happened. Wait, Miller's voice came over the intercom. Dr. Vance, what are you doing? You are moving too close to the temporal lobe. I see an anomaly, Director, Elena lied. I am investigating a possible hematoma. Stop the procedure, Miller commanded. I am coming down there. Elena ignored him. She looked at the head nurse. Nurse, give me 50 milligrams of propofol. We need to deepen the sedation. But doctor, the nurse hesitated. The director said to stop. I am the lead surgeon, Elena shouted. Do as I say. The room was filled with tension. The nurses looked at each other. They didn't know who to follow. Elena felt the walls closing in. She looked at Julian's face. He was still asleep. He was still at her mercy. She realized that she had only a few seconds before Miller burst through the doors. She had to make a choice.